You will hear a lecture on the science of loneliness. Complete the sentences on your exercise sheet. Write no more than 2 words and slash or a number for each answer. The recording will be played once.
Welcome back to Academic Listening Hub. Today we are looking at loneliness, a subject that might seem straightforward, but which turns out to be one of the most serious and complex challenges in modern public health. Not the occasional feeling of being alone, which everyone experiences from time to time, but chronic loneliness, a persistent, painful sense of disconnection from other people that affects millions of people around the world, often without being visible to others, and with consequences that go well beyond emotional discomfort. In 2023, the World Health Organization declared loneliness a global public health priority, placing it alongside issues like obesity and air pollution. That was a significant step because loneliness had for a long time been seen as a personal problem rather than a genuine health crisis. What changed was the research. And as we will see today, the findings are striking. Before looking at the science, it is worth being clear about what loneliness actually means, because it is often misunderstood. Loneliness is not the same as being alone. Solitude, being physically by yourself, can be chosen and even enjoyable. Many people live alone and report feeling socially satisfied. At the same time, loneliness can be intense, even in a crowd, at a party, or inside a relationship. What defines loneliness is not how many people are around you, but the gap between the social connections you have and the ones you want. It is, at its core, a subjective feeling of social deficit. Researchers typically distinguish between 2 types. The first is social loneliness, not having a wider social network of friends, colleagues, or community. The second is emotional loneliness, the absence of a deep, close bond with another person. These are distinct experiences with distinct consequences. Someone might have an active social life, but still feel profound emotional loneliness if they lack a truly close relationship. Someone else might have one deeply intimate partnership, but feel socially lonely without broader community connections. So why does loneliness hurt? And why does it exist at all from an evolutionary point of view? The answer lies in our biology. Human beings are among the most intensely social animals on Earth. For most of our evolutionary history, belonging to a group was not a preference, it was a survival requirement. Being separated from the group meant exposure to predators, loss of food sharing, and exclusion from cooperative defense. In that context, loneliness evolved as a biological alarm signal, similar to hunger or pain, designed to push us toward reconnecting with others. This is the central argument of the neuroscientist John Cacioppo, who spent decades researching loneliness at the University of Chicago. Cacioppo showed that loneliness triggers what he called a hypervigilance response, a state of heightened alertness to social threat. When we feel chronically lonely, the nervous system enters something like a low-level threat state. Cortisol levels rise, inflammation increases, and the brain starts to read ambiguous social signals as hostile. In other words, chronic loneliness makes us more sensitive to rejection and more likely to see neutral interactions as threatening, which can make it harder to form the very connections we need. This response has real physiological effects. Research has shown that chronic loneliness is associated with persistently elevated cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Over time, high cortisol suppresses immune function, disrupts sleep, and promotes systemic inflammation, a process now understood to be involved in many chronic diseases, including cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and certain cancers. The health data on loneliness are, to put it plainly, alarming. A major meta-analysis by Julianne Holt-Lundstad and colleagues at Brigham Young University looked at data from over 3 million people across 70 studies. The results showed that social isolation and loneliness increase the risk of premature death by approximately 26 to 29%. an effect comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and greater than the risk associated with obesity or physical inactivity. That comparison is worth pausing on. Loneliness is as dangerous to long-term health as smoking. That finding significantly changed how the scientific community thinks about social connection, no longer as a lifestyle preference, but as a basic biological need, as important to health as sleep or nutrition. The cardiovascular effects are particularly well documented. Lonely individuals show higher resting blood pressure, faster hardening of the arteries with age, and a significantly higher risk of stroke and coronary heart disease. A 2016 study published in the journal Heart found that loneliness and social isolation were associated with a 29% increased risk of heart attack and a 32% increased risk of stroke. Cognitive health is also affected. Studies that have followed people over many years consistently find that chronic loneliness is associated with faster cognitive decline and a much higher risk of dementia. One widely cited study found that lonely individuals had a 64% increased risk of developing clinical dementia compared to people with strong social connections. The exact mechanisms are still being studied, but are thought to involve chronic stress, disrupted sleep, and reduced mental stimulation from social interaction. If loneliness were rare, its health consequences, however serious, might be manageable at a population level. But it is not rare. Surveys across the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, and Europe consistently find that between 20 and 40% of adults report feeling lonely on a regular basis. In the UK, a 2023 government survey found that around 7.1 million adults, roughly 1 in 10, said they felt lonely often or always. Contrary to what many people assume, loneliness is not primarily a problem of old age. While older adults do face specific risk factors, such as bereavement, reduced mobility, and retirement, research consistently shows that loneliness peaks twice across the lifespan, once in very old age and once in late adolescence and early adulthood. Young adults aged 18 to 25 consistently report some of the highest rates of loneliness of any age group. This has surprised many researchers and policymakers and has raised serious questions about whether digital communication is providing an adequate substitute for face-to-face connection. Governments and public health bodies have started to treat loneliness seriously as a policy issue. In 2018, the United Kingdom became the first country in the world to appoint a Minister for Loneliness, a role created following the recommendations of the Joe Cox Commission on Loneliness. Several other countries have since followed, including Japan, which appointed its own minister in 2021 in response to rising rates of loneliness-related mental health problems and a significant increase in suicide rates, particularly among women, during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the individual level, the research points to several approaches that have shown real results. Social prescribing, where healthcare providers refer patients to community activities, volunteer programs, or social groups, has produced promising outcomes in reducing loneliness and improving well-being. Cognitive behavioral therapy adapted for loneliness has also shown effectiveness, particularly in addressing the negative thought patterns and social anxiety that can keep the condition going. And evidence suggests that improving the quality of social interactions, rather than simply increasing their quantity, is more effective than trying to expand social networks indiscriminately. Loneliness, then, is not a personal weakness or a character flaw. It is a biological signal, one that evolution built into us for good reason. The problem is that the modern world has created conditions in which that signal is being triggered at an extraordinary scale, with consequences for individual health and for society that we are only beginning to understand. Recognizing loneliness as a public health crisis is the first step. The harder work of building the conditions for genuine human connection lies ahead.
Okay, it's time to check your answers. Pause here if you need one more moment, and let's see how you did. That concludes today's listening session. To stay updated with our next videos, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye for now.